questions today.
Okay. This is a really special place for me. It really is. And I can tell you, the Reverend's right, this was my first ever public event after I was named as your senator. And I remember it. I remember every minute of it. And I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate every time you come to Washington, every time you speak out. I appreciate the Reverend Sharpton because he is my friend. He is someone who is a tireless voice for the voiceless. He is someone who has welcomed me back every single year, and I love him for it. So thank you, Reverend. God bless you. So as we come here today to celebrate the remarkable life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and recognize how much progress our country has made over the last 50 years since he was assassinated, we also must recognize how much work there is left to be done. Obviously, our nation has taken some steps backwards. As I look back on 2017, I can't help but feel a little despair of the year that was so divisive, so disorienting, disturbing, even demoralizing. We all heard stories about hate, violence, growing division among people across our beautiful state. Of course, I don't need to tell any of you this. This news isn't news to us, and our city's experienced it every day in our community. We've all read the headlines about hate crimes rising across the state and across the country. We've even seen bullying rise in our schools. We've seen KKK flyers being passed around in a town on Long Island. We've seen an epithet scrawled in graffiti on a family's home, racist slurs. Right here in our own city, we saw Timothy Kaufman murdered by a white supremacist solely because he was black. And in Charlottesville, we saw disgusting hatred on awful display. Hatred that was made even more painful by our president's comments when he blamed both sides for the violence in Virginia. Make no mistake, the hate was brought to Virginia by racists and neo-Nazis, not the peaceful protesters who were standing up for a more tolerant and just America. Sadly, these are not the first or the last bigoted words we have heard from our president. Just in his political career, he is called Mexicans rapists, said Nigerians live in huts, and last week disrespected people from African countries and Haiti in a vulgar comment that wasn't just beneath the dignity of the presidency, but beneath the dignity of humanity. Our country is better than this, even if our president isn't. And we have to call out these racist comments for what they are and fight back with political action. Because this was also the year of policies specifically designed to attack the working poor, the elderly, millions of vulnerable Americans, men and women, especially black and brown men and women who are struggling and working as hard as they can to provide for their families. And you can add to that this administration's comments continuing the failing war on marijuana, which sends thousands of young black women and men who have never committed a violent crime off to prison to see just how far we still have to go. And need I mention that because of the continued cowardice shown by the White House and Congress and the insatiable greed of the NRA, it is another year of no action on gun violence, despite the horrific mass shootings that happened this year and all the gun violence and murders that continue to plague cities all across our state every single day. So we have to ask ourselves, as we begin this new year, what can we do? What kind of action must we take? I can't think of a better way to begin answering this critical question than by reflecting on the wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King that has been handed down to us. We owe it to Dr. King and all those who fought to never lose hope, never lose our faith, and never stop fighting. His lessons are the teachings of perseverance, the teachings of determination, the willingness to never give up, even when it's really hard, especially when it's really hard. We also have to recognize the so many other brave men and women who are carrying those truths forward today, including those who we have lost most recently, like Erica Garner. So we did not come here today to mourn Dr. King. We came here to celebrate him, to celebrate his legacy, his work, his sacrifice, and to remind ourselves that our advocacy must be driven by the empowerment of others in an ongoing fight for those who are most at risk, most in need, most marginalized by society, and most ignored by our current system. And our work will not be done until no one is left behind. Today, we come here to remind ourselves that we are all brothers and sisters in this struggle for equality and justice, regardless of our race, religion, cultural identity, individual passions, because an injustice against one of us is an injustice against all of us. Dr. King tells us what to do at times like this. He says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And that is what the people in this room know and have done. Since the very day of this presidency, you have stood up, you have spoken out, you have marched, you have pushed back, you have not given up, and you have not given an inch. And as your senator, as an American, as a person of faith, it is inspiring to watch what we have done to turn those words into action. And as we resist, as we continue to fight back, how can we be more effective? For me, I turn to scriptures. It's a great how-to book. And it tells me what to and how to do this. In a dark moment like now, I look at the book of Ephesians. Now, Ephesians says, to fight against evil, even when it comes from the highest places in the land, we should put on the full armor of God. The Bible says, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For the struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may stand your ground. And after you have done everything, you stand. So, how do we stand? How do we stand? The good book tells us how to stand. We put on the belt of truth. We know right from wrong. We know truth. We must speak truth to power. We wear the breastplate of righteousness. We know the difference between right and wrong, and we never forget it. We hold the shield of our faith. As Dr. King said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the staircase. So hold tight. We wield the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Our feet are fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. The gospel of peace informs every believer, which is why Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So when we see hate and division in our communities, when we hear those hateful words from our president, when we see someone bullying someone or attacking them or making them feel vulnerable, We are called to be the light. We are called to be the light of the world, which means we must stand up between them. We are the ones who says, no, not on our watch. No, not in my community. No, not here, not right now. We will be the ones to protect them, to protect the vulnerable, protect those at risk, protect those most in need. All of us, and you are too, all of us are called to make a difference. The book of Esther is clear. Who knows if you were called for a time such as this? But we must stand together and work hard and answer that call to make that difference, so that at the end of the day, that arc of history bends towards justice.
Reverend Kirsten Gillibrand. Reverend Kirsten Gillibrand. You know, I don't want to start nothing, Senator, but I helped start that. When I was a kid, I helped start Run, Jesse, Run, you know. You be careful here.